The first thing Clara Bennett felt was the snap of fingers inches from her face. Not heard. Felt. The sharp little movement disturbed the air close enough to touch her skin. Close enough to make every person at the table turn and stare. Champagne glasses paused halfway to painted mouths. Diamond bracelets caught the golden light of the private dining room. A violinist in the corner kept playing, unaware that something ugly had just opened in the middle of all that wealth. Clara stood beside the long table with a silver tray balanced carefully in both hands. The woman in the emerald dress snapped again, right in front of her eyes. Clara did not flinch, because she had spent 26 years learning not to give cruel people the satisfaction. But her fingers tightened around the tray. The woman laughed and looked across the table at the man seated at the head of the room. "She can even hear you. Nico," she said, her red lips curling. "Why would they send someone like her to serve people like us?" The room went still, not silent. Clara knew silence better than anyone in that room. Silence had texture. Silence could be peaceful, lonely, sharp, or merciful. This was not silence. This was attention. Heavy, judging, waiting. Clara could read enough lips to understand the shape of the insult. She also understood the eyes. Eyes had always told her what mouths tried to hide. The guests were amused. The guards near the dark paneled walls were expressionless. The servers behind her looked down, terrified of losing their jobs. And at the head of the table sat Nico Salvatore, the owner of the room. The reason every powerful man in Boston had arrived that night in black cars with tinted windows. He looked nothing like the loud men Clara had learned to fear. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to move quickly. He sat with one hand resting beside a glass of untouched wine. His black suit cut like a warning. His dark hair combed back from a face so controlled it looked almost carved from stone. Everyone said he was a monster. The kind of man who could end a family business with one phone call. The kind of man whose name made politicians smile too carefully and police captains leave restaurants through side doors. The kind of man who did not forgive disrespect because forgiveness was for people who could afford weakness. Clara had been told not to look at him. So, of course, in the worst moment of her life, she did. His eyes were already on her. Not on Isabella Marchetti, the laughing woman in emerald silk. Not on the spilled drop of wine near Clara's wrist. On Clara. As if he had seen the exact second, her pride cracked and she tried to hold it together with breath alone. Isabella leaned back, pleased with herself. "Honestly, Nico, this is embarrassing. This is supposed to be an alliance dinner, not a charity event." A few people smiled. Clara looked down at the tray. She told herself to turn around, walk away, finish the shift, ignore the beautiful woman who wanted to make her feel small, because small people loved borrowing power from dangerous men. Then Isabella lifted her hand and snapped again. This time, Clara stepped back, not from fear, from disgust. The movement made one glass slide on the tray. Red wine tipped, trembling at the rim. Clara caught it before it fell, but the room had already decided she was entertainment. Isabella laughed louder. "Careful, she may not hear us." But apparently she can still make a mess. Clara's cheeks burned. She wanted to sign something sharp, something clean enough to cut. She wanted to say, "I am standing right here. I am a person. I am not furniture. I am not a broken thing you get to mock while your diamonds sit heavy on your throat." But her manager had already warned her. Private dinner. Important people. No mistakes. Her mother's medical bill was due Friday. So Clara swallowed the words. That was when Nico Salvatore stood. He did not shove back his chair. He did not slam his hand on the table. He simply rose. And the room changed around him. The violinist stopped. A man near the door straightened. Isabella's smile faltered, but only for a second. She reached for his sleeve like she owned the right. Nico. Darling. Sit down. I was only joking. Nico did not look at her. He walked around the table slowly. Every step measured. Every pair of eyes following him. Clara wanted to retreat, but her legs would not move. Some deep instinct inside her understood that a predator was approaching. And yet he was not looking at her like prey. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint scar at the edge of his jaw, close enough to smell expensive cedar, rain, and danger, close enough that the air around him seemed warmer than the room. Clara lifted her chin. If he meant to humiliate her too, she would not lower her eyes. For one long second, Nico studied her face. Then he raised his hands. The room froze. His fingers moved with careful precision, not clumsy, not theatrical, not the childish gestures hearing people used when they wanted to pretend effort was kindness. Real signs, slow enough for her to feel them, clear enough to break something open inside her. You are safe with me. Clara forgot how to breathe. Her grip loosened on the tray. Nico reached out and took it before it could fall, placing it on the table behind him without looking away from her. Isabella's face went pale with outrage. Nico, she said sharply. What are you doing? Nico finally turned his head. His voice was low. Clara could not hear it, but she read the shape of his words from the way the room recoiled. I am correcting a mistake. Isabella laughed once, thin and brittle. The mistake is letting staff think they matter. Nico's expression did not change, but every guard in the room shifted. Every powerful man at the table suddenly became interested in his own hands. Nico looked back at Clara and signed again. Are you hurt? The question struck harder than the insult had. Clara hated that her eyes stung. She hated that kindness from a dangerous stranger felt more frightening than cruelty from a beautiful woman. She shook her head. Then, because she refused to look helpless in front of all these people, she signed back with trembling hands. I am not afraid of her. Something flickered in Nico's eyes. Not softness. Something darker. Admiration. Maybe. Or warning. His mouth moved slowly enough for her to read. You should be afraid of me. Clara stared at him, then signed. You have not earned that yet. The room did not understand the exchange, but they understood the change in Nico's face. For the first time all evening, the feared Nico Salvatore almost smiled. Almost. Then glass exploded behind him. A bullet punched through the tall window overlooking Boston Harbor, shattering crystal, sending people screaming and ducking beneath the table. Clara saw the flash before she felt the soundless impact of chaos. Bodies moved. Guards drew weapons. Isabella screamed. The violinist dropped his instrument. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like a wound. Nico moved faster than Clara. Thought a man in a tailored suit could move. One moment he was in front of her. The next, his arm locked around her waist, and he dragged her down behind the overturned table, covering her body with his. A second bullet tore through the chandelier. Glass rained around them like frozen stars. Clara could not hear the gunfire. That made it worse. The world became movement without sound. Open mouths, muzzle flashes, falling crystal, bloodless terror. Nico's heartbeat pounding against her shoulder because he had pulled her so tightly beneath him that she could feel the violence inside his chest. He took her face in one hand and forced her eyes to his. Stay down, he signed. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. Behind him, Isabella crawled under the table, not toward Nico, but toward the black leather case one of the Marchetti men had brought in. Clara saw it because she had spent her life seeing what other people missed. Isabella's hand slipped inside the case. She pulled out a phone. Not to call for help, To send a message, Clara watched the screen light up with one word: failed. Then Isabella looked up and met Clara's eyes. The smile that crossed her face was gone in an instant. But Clara had seen it, and Isabella knew. Nico looked over his shoulder, just as one of his guards pulled him toward the service exit. Clara grabbed his sleeve. He turned back, impatient and dangerous. She pointed at Isabella, then signed. She knew. Nico's eyes sharpened. The dining room erupted again as a third bullet struck the wall above them. Nico did not ask questions. He wrapped one arm around Clara and pulled her through the service corridor as armed men closed around them like a living wall. Behind them, Isabella Marchetti screamed his name as if she were the victim. But Clara had seen the truth. And in Nico Salvatore's world, seeing the truth was often the most dangerous thing a woman could do. The service hallway behind the restaurant was narrow, white, and too bright. Clara stumbled in her black waitress shoes. One hand pressed against the wall as guards rushed past her. Their mouths moved fast. Too fast. Commands. Curses. Names. She caught fragments from lips and gestures. Rooftop. Shooter. Marchetti. Car. Nico kept one hand around her wrist. Not painful, but unbreakable. Outside. The alley was wet from earlier rain. Black SUVs waited with headlights cutting through steam rising from the pavement. Men in dark coats opened doors before Nico reached them. Clara tried to pull away. Nico turned. She signed sharply. I have to go home. He looked at her hands, then at her face. His answer came without hesitation. No. Clara's anger pushed through the shock. You do not own me. His jaw tightened. He stepped closer, blocking the alley light. A king in a ruined kingdom. No. He signed. But someone tried to kill me tonight. You saw who helped them. That means someone will come for you. Clara swallowed. Across the alley, Isabella stood near another SUV, wrapped in a man's coat, looking fragile and furious. Her father, Massimo Marchetti, had arrived from somewhere nearby. His silver hair untouched by the rain, his face smooth as old marble. He looked at Clara once. Only once. That was enough. It was the look of a man deciding whether a life was worth the inconvenience of erasing. Clara had known cruel customers, rude men, landlords who smiled while raising rent. But she had never seen death treated like paperwork until Massimo Marchetti looked at her. Nico stepped into her line of sight. Get in the car, he said slowly, making sure she could read him. Clara shook her head. His eyes darkened. For a moment, the air between them became something dangerous and intimate. Not romantic. Not yet. It was the feeling of two stubborn people standing at the edge of a fire, both pretending not to feel the heat. Then Nico signed. Please. One word. It changed the shape of him. Not because it was soft, but because it cost him. Clara looked toward the restaurant. Her purse, phone, and coat were still inside. Her old life was still inside. Her tips were probably scattered beneath a table covered in glass. Then another black car turned into the alley too slowly. Nico saw it. His expression went cold. He pushed Clara behind him and snapped an order to his men. A guard opened the SUV door. This time, Clara got in. Nico entered beside her. And the door shut on the world she understood. The SUV moved before she could buckle her seatbelt. Boston blurred past the tinted windows. All wet streets. Gold reflections. And buildings with dark windows watching like witnesses. Clara pressed herself against the door, trying to put space between herself and the man beside her. Nico did not touch her. That unsettled her more. He could have grabbed her, commanded her. treated her like evidence. Instead, he sat with one hand resting on his knee, the other holding his phone, his expression unreadable as messages flashed across the screen. Clara watched his profile. He was handsome in the way storms were beautiful from behind glass. Severe, controlled, too dangerous to admire up close. He noticed her watching and turned. She signed. "Why do you know my language?" Something passed through his face and vanished. He looked away. For a moment, she thought he would refuse to answer. Then his hands moved. "My sister." Clara's anger softened despite herself. Was she deaf? Nico nodded once. Clara waited, but he gave nothing more. A wall dropped behind his eyes. The SUV crossed the bridge toward the seaport, then descended into an underground garage beneath a building that looked like polished black glass. Guards appeared before the car stopped. Elevators opened without buttons being pressed. Clara stepped out and immediately felt the weight of money. Not warmth, not home. Money. The kind that lived in marble floors and silent elevators and cameras hidden so well only someone used to being watched would notice them. Nico led her to a penthouse high above the city. The living room stretched toward floor-to-ceiling windows, the harbor glittering far below. Rain moved against the glass like gray silk. The furniture was beautiful and uncomfortable, arranged as if no one had ever laughed there. Clara stood near the entrance. Nico removed his jacket and handed it to a guard without looking. His white shirt was marked with a thin line of blood near the shoulder. Clara pointed. He glanced down as if surprised his body had bothered to bleed. "It is nothing," he mouthed. She signed. "Men like you always say that before falling over." He stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he looked amused. A woman entered carrying a medical kit. Older, calm, with silver at her temples and sharp eyes that took in everything. "This is Dr. Vows," Nico said, turning his face toward Clara so she could read him. "She will check you." Clara crossed her arms. "I am not the one bleeding." Nico's gaze dropped to her hands. "Then check me," he said. The words landed between them like a dare. "Dr." Vale raised one eyebrow but said nothing. Clara should have refused. She was not a nurse. She was a waitress. A deaf waitress who had just been kidnapped politely by a Mafia boss after witnessing his fiancée betray him during an assassination attempt. But Nico sat in a chair near the window and began unbuttoning his cuff with irritating calm. "Doctor." Vale cleaned the shallow cut on his shoulder while Clara stood nearby, pretending not to notice the hard lines of muscle beneath his shirt, the dark tattoo crossing his ribs, the old scars that told stories his mouth never would. Nico watched Clara instead of the wound. It made her skin feel too tight. She signed. "Stop staring." He signed back. "Stop shaking." Only then did she realize her hands were trembling. She lowered them quickly. His expression changed. The amusement faded. He said something to Dr. Vale, then stood. "Doctor." Vale left the room. The guards withdrew to the hallway. Clara and Nico were alone above the city. She did not like how aware of him she became in the quiet. Nico walked to a cabinet, poured water into a glass, and placed it on the table beside her. He did not hand it to her, did not force the gesture, just put it within reach. Then he signed slowly. "You are a witness." Clara's stomach tightened. "I know what I saw." "Do you?" She lifted her chin. Isabella saw a message. One word. Failed. Nico's eyes went motionless. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Clara continued. "She looked at me. She knew I saw." Nico turned toward the window. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he signed. "Isabella is not just my fiancée." Clara's heart gave a strange, unwelcome twist at the word He noticed. Of course he noticed. His gaze sharpened. But he continued. She is part of an alliance. Her father controls the North Docks. My family controls the harbor routes. The marriage was supposed to stop a war. Clara signed. And now Nico's mouth curved without humor. Now the war has arrived early. A vibration buzzed through the table. Nico checked his phone. His face changed so slightly, most people would have missed it. Clara did not. He handed her the phone. A photo filled the screen. Her apartment building. Not from a database. Not from an old address record. A live image. A black sedan parked across the street. Clara's blood went cold. Nico signed. They found you faster than I expected. Clara backed away from the phone. My mother's things are there. He looked up. You live alone. She hated the sudden exposure of that question. My mother died last year. Something flickered in his eyes. Clara hated herself for noticing. She signed. I need my phone. My purse. My life. Nico stepped closer, but stopped before he entered her space. For tonight, your life is here. No. Clara, no. You do not get to sign one kind sentence and decide what happens to me. His face hardened. I am trying to keep you alive. I did not ask to be pulled into your war. Neither did my sister. The words came out of his hands before he could stop them. Then everything went still. Clara looked at him. Nico's jaw tightened. He turned away, but not before she saw it. Pain, old, buried, still bleeding under all that power. Clara's anger lost its sharpest edge. What happened to her, she signed. Nico stood with his back to her, looking out over the rain-struck city. For a long time, he did not answer. Then his hands moved at his sides. She trusted the wrong people. Clara waited. His hands closed into fists. I was 17. She was 12. Deaf, brilliant, stubborn. She saw something she should not have seen. I told her I would keep her safe. The city lights reflected in the glass, hiding his face. I failed. Clara felt the words settle over the room. She did not forgive him for dragging her here. She did not trust him, but she understood. Suddenly, that the sentence he had signed at the restaurant was not a line. It was a wound. You are safe with me, a promise he had once broken, and now, maybe, needed desperately to keep. By morning, Clara Bennett was dead on the internet, not truly dead. Worse, publicly alive in the wrong story. The video spread before sunrise. Someone at the restaurant had recorded the moment Isabella snapped her fingers in Clara's face, but whoever posted it had cut the video carefully. It showed Clara spilling wine. It showed Nico standing. It showed him taking her away after the shooting began. It did not show Isabella's phone. By 8 a.m., gossip blogs were calling Clara the deaf waitress who seduced Boston's most dangerous man. By 9, they had found her old photos. By 10, strangers were commenting on her body, her job, her disability, her dead mother's fundraiser page, her apartment building. Clara stood barefoot in Nico's kitchen, wearing a gray sweater one of his staff had given her, staring at a tablet with her own face on it. Her hands were still, too still. That was how Nico knew she was angry. He stood across from her in a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, speaking to 3 men at once, while watching Clara with the portion of his attention he seemed unable to control. She had slept 2 hours in a guest room larger than her entire apartment, or tried to. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Isabella smile, and the word failed. Now the world thought Clara was the scandal. Isabella had released a statement by noon. Clara read it from a news site. Poor Nico was helping a confused employee during a traumatic incident. Any suggestion of betrayal inside our families is disgusting. The young woman is clearly overwhelmed and being used by people who want attention. Clara laughed once. No sound came out. Nico dismissed his men with a look. When they were alone, Clara turned the tablet toward him. She signed. Your fiancé called me confused. Nico's expression was stone. Ex-fiancé. The sign came fast. Clean. Final. Clara blinked. What? He stepped closer. The engagement is over. A dangerous thrill moved through her before she could stop it. She hated that. She hated more that Nico saw. Do not look relieved. He signed. Clara's eyes narrowed. Do not tell me what to feel. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her hands. For a second, the space between them tightened. Then his phone vibrated. He checked it and turned the screen toward her. A message from an unknown number. Tell the waitress to forget what she saw, or we send her mother-s ashes back in pieces. Clara stopped breathing. The kitchen tilted. Nico took the phone away before she could read it twice. She shoved his arm. Hard. Where are they? She signed. Nico's face went lethal. His men removed the urn from your apartment before Marchetti's people arrived. Clara stared at him. You went through my home to protect what matters to you. That is not your decision. His control cracked. No. Clara, it became my decision when they threatened a dead woman to silence you. She stepped closer. Furious enough to forget fear. You do not know what matters to me. Nico's eyes burned. Then tell me. The words were spoken, not signed. She read them anyway. For a moment. She almost did. She almost told him that her mother had been the only person who never made deafness feel like a missing piece. That every bill, every late shift, every humiliating smile from customers had been bearable because she was still building a life from the ruins. That the apartment was small, but it was hers. That being protected by a powerful man felt too much like being controlled by one. Instead, Clara signed. I want my mother's urn. Nico nodded once. You will have it. Now, he hesitated. Clara's eyes flashed. Now, she repeated. A muscle moved in his jaw. Then he grabbed his coat. The drive to the safe storage facility happened under a sky heavy with snow clouds. Boston looked cold and expensive. Its streets full of people who had no idea how close they were to a war moving beneath their feet. Nico sat beside Clara in the back of the SUV. He had brought 4 vehicles, 8 armed men, and no explanation. Clara stared out the window, refusing to look at him. Her phone had been recovered from the restaurant, but Nico's people had cleaned it, checked it, and returned it with security installed. She hated the small blue shield icon now sitting in the corner of her screen. It felt like a collar. Nico seemed to sense the thought. It is not surveillance, he said slowly, letting her read his lips. It is protection. Clara signed without looking at him. That is what men say when they want surveillance to sound romantic. His mouth went still. Then, to her surprise, he signed. Fair. She glanced at him, despite herself. He looked almost irritated by his own agreement. At the storage facility, Nico led her into a private room where a plain wooden box sat on a table. Clara forgot the guards, forgot the Mafia, forgot the scandal. She crossed the room and placed both hands on the box. Her mother's name was engraved on a small gold plate. Evelyn Bennett. For the first time since the dinner, Clara's body gave way to the grief she had been holding upright through force alone. She did not sob loudly. Her grief had always been quiet, but Nico saw the way her shoulders shook. He stood near giving her distance. That made it worse. A cruel man would have been easier to hate. Clara pressed her forehead to the box and closed her eyes. When she opened them, Nico was still there, watching, not intruding, not leaving. She signed. My mother used to say hearing people were afraid of silence because they might meet themselves inside it. Nico's gaze softened by one almost invisible degree. She was wise. She was lonely. He absorbed the correction, then signed. So are you. Clara's hands froze. Nico looked away first. The moment lasted too long. Then the window behind the storage room shattered. Clara saw the glass break before she felt the blast of movement. Nico lunged. This time, she moved too. She threw herself down and pulled the urn with her, clutching the box to her chest as bullets struck the wall behind them. The guards returned fire from the hallway. Nico dragged Clara behind a steel cabinet, his body covering the exposed side of hers. His face was inches away. His hand hovered near her cheek, wanting to check if she was hurt. He stopped before touching her. That restraint undid something in her. She signed with one hand. I am okay. His eyes dropped to the urn in her arms, then back to her face. For the first time, Clara saw fear in him. Not panic, fear. Because if the bullet had been 2 inches lower, his promise would have failed again. A guard shouted something from the doorway. Nico turned. Read the room. Then pulled Clara to her feet. They ran through a back corridor into a loading bay where snow had started to fall in thin white threads. A black SUV screeched to a stop. But before they reached it, a man stepped from behind a concrete pillar and aimed a gun at Clara. Nico moved in front of her. No hesitation. No calculation. The man fired. Nico's body arced. Clara screamed without hearing herself. The guards cut the shooter down before he could fire again. Nico stayed standing for 3 seconds. Then his knees hit the wet concrete. Clara dropped with him, her hands flying over his chest, searching for blood. He caught her wrist. His fingers were cold. Vest, he mouthed. Bulletproof vest. Relief hit so hard she nearly collapsed against him. Then fury followed. She slapped his shoulder. He winced. She signed wildly. You idiot. You stepped in front of a bullet. Nico, still on his knees in the snow, looked up at her. He signed back. Yes, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Clara stared at him. Snow gathered in his dark hair. His men stood around them with guns drawn. Her mother's urn sat safely against her chest. The city smelled like exhaust and winter and violence. Nico's gaze locked on hers. In that frozen loading bay, with death still warm in the air. Something shifted between them. Not love. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Need. Nico moved Clara to the old Salvatore house that night. Not the penthouse. Not a hotel. Not a fortress everyone knew about. A mansion on the rocky edge of the Massachusetts coast, hidden behind iron gates and black pine trees, where the Atlantic crashed against cliffs below like it wanted to drag the whole house into the dark. Clara hated that it was beautiful. A place like that should have looked evil. Instead, it looked lonely. Candlelight warmed the windows. Snow gathered on the stone steps. Inside, the house smelled of old wood, leather, sea air, and secrets. Nico's men called it Blackwater. Clara called it a cage. He gave her a room with a fireplace, a balcony, and fresh clothes folded at the foot of the bed. Her mother's urn was placed on the mantel with a vase of white lilies beside it. That was the first thing that made Clara cry again. The second was the small brass lamp beside the bed. It flashed when someone rang the doorbell. It flashed when the fire alarm was tested. It flashed when her phone received a message. The house had been prepared for someone deaf. Not quickly, not recently. Carefully, Clara stood in the room, staring at the lamp. Nico waited at the doorway. She turned to him slowly. Your sister lived here. His expression closed. Yes. Clara looked around again. The curtains. The clear sightlines. The bed angled toward the door. The soft rugs that let her feel footsteps. What was her name? Nico did not answer at first. Then, with hands that moved slower than usual, he signed. Lucia. The name carried weight. Clara touched the mantle near her mother's urn. You loved her. Nico's face hardened. Love did not save her. No, but it means she existed. That landed. He looked at Clara as if she had touched a bruise no one else dared approach. Then he turned to leave. Clara did not let him. Why did Isabella hate me before I saw anything? Nico paused. The fire snapped silently behind her. Because she saw you look at me. Clara's pulse changed. That is ridiculous. No, it is accurate. She crossed her arms. You looked at me first. His eyes returned to her. Yes. The honesty was more intimate than a touch. Clara looked away. Nico stepped into the room. But only one step. Clara. She looked back. He signed. I do not want you involved in my world. Too late. His mouth pressed into a hard line. Yes. For a moment. He looked almost tired. Not weak. Never weak. But burdened by his own power. Then he said, lock the door. Clara read the words. She signed. Would that stop anyone here? His answer came with no humor. It would stop me. He left. Clara locked the door. Then she stood there for a long time, staring at the brass key in her hand, wondering why the most frightening part of the night was not the bullets. It was believing him. 3 days passed inside Blackwater, like a storm holding its breath. Clara learned the rhythm of the house. Guards changed at 6 and midnight. The cook, Mrs. Alessi, pretended not to be kind by leaving too much food outside Clara's door. Dr. Vale arrived every morning to check Nico's bruised ribs from the bullet impact. Nico held meetings in the library with men who spoke too fast and watched Clara like she was both a guest and a liability. Nico never entered her room, never touched her without reason, never treated her like she was fragile. That made the tension worse, because every restraint became visible. Every almost touch became louder than skin. At breakfast on the 4th morning, Clara found him in the sunroom, shirt sleeves rolled up, a tablet open in front of him. He was watching ASL lessons, not beginner lessons, advanced, legal terms, emotional phrases, regional variations. Clara stood in the doorway, unseen for once. Nico replayed the same phrase 3 times. I should have protected you. His hands repeated it, not for her, for a ghost. Clara stepped forward. Nico looked up and immediately closed the tablet. Too late. She sat across from him. Who are you practicing for? His jaw tightened. No one. Liar. He leaned back, studying her. You are very brave when you should not be. She read the sentence and signed. You are very bossy when no one asked. His eyes warmed, just slightly. Then Mrs. Alessi entered with coffee, saw the 2 of them staring at each other, and left twice as quickly. Clara looked down, suddenly aware of the pink sweater she had borrowed. The way Nico's gaze lingered on her sleeves because they kept slipping over her hands. He signed. There is a meeting tonight. Clara frowned. With who? Marchetti. Her stomach tightened. Nico continued. Massimo claims Isabella was framed. He wants peace. You believe him? No. Then why meet? To see where he lies. Clara looked toward the windows. The sea was iron gray under the winter sky. I am coming. Nico's answer was instant. No, She laughed silently. This argument again. You are not bait. I am the witness. You are the target. And hiding me here helps. His eyes flashed. It keeps you breathing. Clara leaned forward. I read lips. I read faces. I saw Isabella when none of your armed men did. You need me in that room. Nico stood. The chair legs scraped against the floor. She felt the vibration through her feet. I need you alive, he said. The words were sharp enough that she understood without reading perfectly. Clara stood too. Then stop treating alive like it means locked away. Nico stepped toward her. This time, he came too close. Close enough that Clara had to tilt her head back. Close enough that she saw the pulse in his throat. Close enough that the cold, controlled mafia boss became a man with blood under his skin and restraint held between his teeth. You think I do not know what a cage is, he signed. I built my whole life inside one. Then opened the door. His gaze dropped to her mouth again. For one dangerous second, Clara thought he might kiss her. For one dangerous second, she wanted him to. Instead, he stepped back. The absence felt like impact. You may attend, he said slowly. But you stay beside me. Clara signed. I stay where I can see. Nico's eyes narrowed. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. That evening, Clara entered the underground club beneath Blackwater, wearing a navy dress she had not chosen and flat shoes she had. Nico had noticed the shoes but said nothing. She appreciated that more than she wanted to. The club was carved into the stone below the mansion. All black walls, amber light, low leather booths, and a bar that looked untouched by law. Men with old family names sat with glasses of whiskey. Women in diamonds spoke softly. Guards lined the edges of the room. When Clara walked in beside Nico, every conversation shifted, not stopped. Shifted like the entire room had inhaled. Isabella Marchetti stood near the bar in white silk, looking like innocence dressed itself for war. Her father stood beside her, silver-haired and smiling. Massimo Marchetti spread his arms. Nico, he said. Clara watched his mouth. Such warmth, such poison. Nico did not shake his hand. Isabella's eyes slid to Clara. Her smile sharpened. Still collecting broken little things. Nico Clara's hands remained still at her sides. Nico's face did not change. But the room felt his anger. Massimo chuckled. My daughter speaks too freely. Young love has made her jealous. Clara stepped forward before Nico could answer. Everyone looked at her. She signed to Nico. Translate exactly. His gaze locked on hers. Then he turned to the room. Clara signed slowly. Your daughter tried to kill him. Nico spoke the words aloud. The room went still. Isabella laughed. Clara continued. She sent a message during the shooting. I saw it. Nico translated. Massimo's smile dimmed. Isabella tilted her head. How convenient. The deaf waitress sees everything. Hears nothing. And suddenly becomes Nico's pet witness. Clara felt the insult. But she did not look away. She signed again. I am not his pet. Nico's voice lowered when he translated. Then Clara added, and you are not as beautiful when you are scared. The room changed. A few men looked down to hide reactions. Isabella's face tightened. For the first time, Clara saw the woman behind the cruelty spoiled, cornered, and terrified that power could slip from her hands. Massimo moved first. His hand went to his jacket. Nico's gun was out before Clara could blink. Every guard in the room drew at once. The underground club became a painting of violence waiting to happen. Clara stood beside Nico, heart racing, staring at the barrel aimed at Massimo Marchetti's chest. Nico's voice was soft. Clara could not hear it, But she read the shape. Do not reach again. Massimo slowly lifted his hand away from his jacket. A small envelope dropped from inside. It landed near Clara's foot. Everyone stared. Clara bent before anyone could stop her. Inside the envelope was a photograph. Nico as a teenager, a young girl beside him, smiling with her hands mid-sign. Lucia. On the back, one sentence had been written in black ink. Ask Nico what he did the night she died. Clara's blood chilled. Nico saw the photo. For the first time since she had met him, his control shattered. Not loudly. Worse. Silently. His face emptied. Isabella smiled. There it is, she said. The real reason he protects you. You remind him of the sister he got killed. Clara turned to Nico. His eyes were on the photograph. Massimo spoke slowly, making sure Clara could read. Lucia Salvatore died because Nico chose power over family. He was told to bring her to a safe house. Instead, he went to prove himself in a meeting. By the time he returned, she was gone. Clara looked at Nico. He did not deny it. Something inside her sank. Nico finally looked at her. And the pain in his face was unbearable, because it was still trying to be controlled. Clara took one step back. His hand lifted slightly, not touching. Clara, she shook her head. Nico's hand fell. Isabella's smile became cruel again. Oh, sweetheart, she said to Clara. Did you think you were special? You are just his second chance. The words landed exactly where Isabella wanted them to. Clara turned and walked out of the club. No one stopped her. Not even Nico. Clara made it halfway up the stone stairs before Nico caught up. He did not grab her. He moved ahead and blocked the landing. Good. She wanted to see him. Wanted to hate him properly. She signed. Is it true? His face was pale beneath the gold light. Yes. The answer struck harder than any lie would have. Clara's hands trembled. You left her. His jaw tightened. Yes. Why? He looked away. Because I was 17 and arrogant and desperate to prove I was not a frightened boy wearing my father's name. Clara swallowed, and she died. Nico's eyes returned to her. No, she was taken. For 6 hours, she was alive. I found her too late. The words moved through his hands like broken glass. Clara's anger faltered despite herself. Nico continued. Marchetti men took her. My father covered it up to avoid a war. I killed the men who touched her. But Massimo gave the order. I could never prove it. Clara looked toward the door below, where Massimo and Isabella remained surrounded by Nico's men. So this marriage was my way inside his family. Clara stared at him. Revenge. His face hardened. Justice. You were going to marry her. No. Clara searched his eyes. Nico exhaled through his nose. Bitter. I was going to let them believe I would. Long enough to find the evidence. Understanding came slowly. Then painfully. I ruined your plan. His answer was immediate. You survived my plan. That was worse. Clara looked down at her hands. Isabella was right about one thing. Nico went still. Clara signed. You did not see me first. You saw Lucia. His face changed. No. She looked up. Do not lie to me. He stepped closer, then stopped. I saw a woman being humiliated and refusing to break. That is all. No. The honesty hung between them. Nico's voice came low. Rough. Shaped for her to read. I saw you. Clara wanted not to believe him. She wanted the world simple again. Cruel fiancé. Dangerous boss. Witness. Protection. Escape. But nothing about Nico Salvatore was simple. And nothing about how he looked at her felt borrowed from a ghost. Still, Pain made her sharp. I am not your redemption. His eyes darkened. I know. I am not your sister. I know. I am not yours. That one landed differently. The air shifted. Nico's expression became something dangerous and restrained. No, he said slowly. You are not. But his eyes said he wanted her to be. Clara felt it, the terrible heat of it, the terrible pull. Then her phone flashed in her pocket. E-message. Unknown number. Leave through the east gate in 10 minutes. Or the whole world learns what Nico did to Lucia. Attached was a video still. A little girl in a basement, hands tied, eyes terrified. Clara's stomach turned. Nico saw her face and reached for the phone. She pulled back. No. Clara, no. You protect by controlling. I need to think without your hands around every door. His face hardened. But his eyes moved over her expression with painful accuracy. He knew she was already planning something. So did she. That night, Clara did not sleep. She watched the sea from her balcony while the lamp beside her bed flashed with security alerts she ignored. Her mother's urn rested on the mantel. Lucia's photograph lay on the desk where Clara had placed it. 2 dead women in one room. 2 men who had failed them in different ways. At Doy Trace Prezecha, M. Clara opened her door. The hallway guard was gone. That was the first sign. The second was the east stairwell door left unlocked. The third was Isabella, waiting in the snow beside the garden wall, wrapped in a white coat, smiling like she had arranged the weather. Clara stepped outside. She had not come unprepared. Her phone was recording in her coat pocket. Isabella's mouth moved clearly beneath the garden lights. I knew you would come. Girls like you always need answers. Clara signed. Where is the video from? Isabella laughed. You really do love signing at people who do not care. Clara stepped closer. Isabella's smile sharpened. My father kept everything. Nico E. Shame. Lucia S. Death. The old deals. The police he paid. The judges he owned. All of it. Why show me? Because Nico will burn the city down if I send that video out. But if you betray him first, he breaks quietly. Clara stared. Isabella leaned in. You are going to tell the world Nico kidnapped you, that he threatened you, that he manipulated you because you are deaf and vulnerable and easy for him to control. Clara's hands curled. I am not vulnerable for your convenience. Oh, sweetheart, Isabella smiled. Everyone will believe you are. That was the cruelty Clara had known all her life. Not the insult itself. The way people turned her body, her silence, her difference, into a story they could use. Clara looked past Isabella. A figure moved near the trees. Then another, not Nico's guards. Marchetti men. A trap. Clara stepped back. Isabella grabbed her wrist. The touch lasted 1 second. Then a black shape moved out of the snow like night becoming human. Nico. His hand closed around Isabella's arm and pulled her away from Clara, so fast Isabella gasped. Nico's face was terrifying. Not angry. Empty. Around them, his guards emerged from the trees with weapons drawn. The east gate opened. More headlights cut through the snow. Marchetti SUVs. Clara's pulse went wild. Isabella laughed breathlessly. Looking from Nico to Clara. You followed her. How romantic. Nico looked at Clara. You left the room alone. She signed back. You left the door unlocked. His eyes narrowed. You knew. I knew someone wanted me outside. A shot cracked through the garden. Clara felt the vibration before she saw the muzzle flash. Nico shoved her behind the stone fountain as the garden erupted into chaos. Snow flew from hedges. Marble chipped. Men shouted. Headlights swung wildly across the trees. Isabella crawled away in her white coat. No longer elegant, just desperate. Clara pressed herself against the fountain. Heart hammering, Nico crouched beside her. Stay here. She grabbed his sleeve. No. His eyes flashed. Clara. She pointed toward Isabella, who was running toward the east gate. She has proof. Nico looked. In Isabella's hand, a small black drive caught the light. Nico moved. So did Clara. He turned back furious. But there was no time. They ran through the snow as gunfire tore across the garden. Nico kept himself between Clara and every line of danger, moving with lethal precision. Clara saw one man raise a gun from behind a pillar and shove Nico's shoulder before the shot came. The bullet struck stone where his head had been. Nico looked at her once. A whole sentence lived in that look. Then Isabella slipped on the icy path. The drive flew from her hand and skidded across the snow toward the cliff path. Clara ran for it. Nico shouted her name. She did not hear it, but she felt the whole night turn toward her. She reached the drive first. A hand grabbed her hair from behind. Pain burst across her scalp. A machete guard dragged her backward toward the cliff edge. Nico reached them like a storm. The fight was brutal and fast. Clara saw flashes Nico's fist. The guard, S, knife. Snow under black shoes. Blood on someone's mouth. The ocean raging far below. The guard slammed Nico into the stone wall. The knife lifted. Clara did not think. She grabbed a loose garden lantern and struck the guard across the side of the head. He fell. Nico stared at her. She stared back, breathing hard. Lantern still in her hands. Then the cliff path beneath them cracked. Ice. Snow. Old stone. Clara slipped. For one weightless second, the world became sky. Nico caught her wrist. His body hit the ground hard. One arm locked around a metal railing. The other holding Clara over the drop. Below her, the Atlantic smashed against black rocks. Clara clutched the drive in her free hand. Nico's face twisted with effort. His grip on the railing slipped. Drop the drive, he mouthed. She shook her head. Drop it. No. His eyes went wild in a way she had never seen. Not with rage. With terror. Clara, please. The word please, again. Only this time, it was not power lowering itself. It was a man breaking. She looked at the drive in her hand. Lucia's truth. Nico's revenge. The thing that could end a war. Then she looked at Nico, his hand shaking around her wrist. She dropped the drive. It fell into the dark. Nico pulled her up with a sound she could not hear, dragging her against his chest as they collapsed onto the snow-covered path. For 1 second, neither moved. Then Nico's arms closed around her. Not carefully, desperately. His face buried against her hair. Clara felt his heart beating like a fist against her. She should have pushed him away. She did not. Behind them, Isabella screamed as Nico's guards captured her near the gate. The fight ended in pieces. Headlights, snow, men on their knees, guns lowered. But Clara stayed against Nico's chest, shaking, alive, and furious with herself for feeling safer there than anywhere else in the world. The next morning, Nico did not come to her room. That frightened Clara more than his presence would have. Blackwater felt bruised in daylight. Bullet marks scarred the garden walls. Broken stone lay beneath the east fountain. Snow covered the violence badly, like a sheet thrown over a body. Clara sat in Lucia's old room with her mother's urn beside her, and a bandage around her wrist where Nico had held her above the cliff. Not too tight, just enough to leave a mark. Doctor, Vale had checked her twice. Mrs. Alessi brought tea. Guards avoided her eyes with new respect, but Nico stayed away. By noon, Clara had enough. She found him in the library. He stood beside the fireplace, speaking to a man Clara did not know. On the desk lay photographs, documents, maps of Boston Harbor, and printouts from Isabella's phone. The black drive had been lost. But Clara's phone had not. The recording from her coat pocket had captured Isabella admitting that her father kept evidence, that Nico's shame could break him, that they intended to force Clara into a false public accusation. It was not everything, but it was enough to start the collapse. The unknown man left when Clara entered. Nico did not turn around. She signed anyway. "You are avoiding me." He looked over his shoulder. Yes. The honesty irritated her. Why? His hands moved after a pause. "Because when you were falling, I chose you over the proof." Clara stepped closer. "That is bad," his mouth tightened. "For my family, for my revenge, for every dead, Salvatore waiting for Marchetti to answer, yes." Clara absorbed that. "And for you?" He looked at her then. "For me." It was the only choice. The room seemed to lose air. Clara's heartbeat slowed into something heavy. Nico's eyes dropped to the bandage on her wrist. "I hurt you. You saved me. I put you there. I chose to go. Because of me. Because of Isabella. Because of your world. Because I wanted the truth." Each answer stripped away one of his defenses. Nico looked angry about it. Good. Clara was angry too. She signed. "Do not make me another ghost you punish yourself with." His face changed. She stepped closer. "I am alive." His gaze moved over her face with unbearable intensity. "Yes," he said. The word was shaped slowly. Almost reverently, Clara felt the pull again. The room warmed around them. Firelight moved across the bookshelves. Snow pressed against the windows. Nico stood close enough now that she could feel the heat of him. His hand lifted. Stopped. Always stopping. Always choosing restraint at the last second, as if touching her would cost him the last piece of control he owned. Clara looked at his hand, then at him. "I am not afraid of your hand." His eyes darkened. "You should be." "Maybe." She stepped into his reach. Nico went still. Clara took his hand and placed it against her cheek. The contact was warm, rough, and devastatingly careful. His thumb moved once near her cheekbone. A controlled man, unraveling one breath at a time. Clara closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, Nico was watching her like he had found something sacred in a place built for violence. He leaned closer, slowly, giving her time, giving himself none. The library door burst open. A guard entered. Breathing hard, Nico dropped his hand from Clara's face and turned. The Mafia boss returning in an instant. The guard spoke quickly. Clara caught only fragments. Broadcast. Press. Isabella. Nico's face went cold. He turned on the television mounted above the bar. A live news feed filled the screen. Isabella Marchetti stood outside the Boston courthouse. Pale and beautiful. Surrounded by cameras. Clara read the captions. Isabella Marchetti claims Mafia heir kidnapped deaf waitress to frame her family. Then Isabella began to speak. Clara watched her mouth. Nico Salvatore is dangerous. He has manipulated an innocent, disabled woman, using her condition to control what she thinks she saw. Clara's blood went cold. The word disabled did not offend her. The way Isabella wielded it did, like a weapon wrapped in pity. Isabella continued, tears shining perfectly. Clara Bennett needs protection from him. The room around Clara blurred. Nico turned off the television before the clip ended. His men began talking at once. Nico silenced them with one raised hand. Then he looked at Clara. His expression was carefully blank. Too carefully. He signed. You do not have to do anything. Clara stared. For once, she understood exactly what he was doing. He was offering her a door. A way out. Let the scandal continue. Let the powerful men fight. Let Clara disappear into witness protection under someone else's name. It should have been what she wanted. Safety. Distance. Her old life back. Or something like it. But then Clara thought of Isabella snapping fingers in her face. Of strangers calling her confused. Of Lucia's photograph. Of Nico's hand stopping before it touched her cheek because he believed everything he loved became a casualty. Clara picked up the remote and turned the television back on. Isabella's face filled the screen. Clara signed one sentence. I want a camera. Nico's eyes sharpened. No. Clara turned to him. She is using my silence because she thinks the world will believe her voice first. Nico stepped closer. The moment you speak publicly, every enemy I have will know your face. They already do. He shook his head. Clara, she cut him off. You said I was safe with you. His expression tightened. Do you trust? That Clara looked at him. The honest answer scared her. Yes. Nico went still. The whole room seemed to understand that something had happened. Something more dangerous than a declaration. Nico's eyes did not leave Clara's face. Then he nodded once. By sunset. Every major Boston news outlet had received a video. It was not polished. Not edited. Clara sat in Nico's library, wearing a simple black dress. Her hair pulled back. Her hands steady in her lap. Beside her sat a certified ASL interpreter Nico's lawyer had brought in. Nico did not appear in the frame. That had been Clara's demand. This was not his defense. It was her truth. The camera light turned red. Clara looked into the lens. Then she began to sign. My name is Clara Bennett. I am deaf. I am not confused. I am not helpless. I am not a prop in anyone's war. The interpreter spoke for her. Clara continued. Isabella Marchetti mocked me because she thought I would not answer. Then she lied because she thought people would believe a powerful woman's voice before a waitress's hands. Her fingers did not tremble. I saw Isabella send a message during the shooting. I recorded her trying to force me into accusing Nico Salvatore. I have given that recording to federal authorities and my attorney. Nico stood off camera, half in shadow, watching her with an expression no one else would ever be allowed to see. Clara signed the final words slowly. Being deaf does not make me less aware. It made me notice what everyone else ignored. The video went live at 6:03 p.m. By 6:20. The city was watching. By 7:00. Isabella's courthouse performance began falling apart. By 8:15. Massimo Marchetti disappeared. By 9:40. Nico received a message from an encrypted number. Trade the waitress for the girl. Attached was a photograph. Not Lucia. A child. 7 or 8 years old. Dark hair. Frightened eyes. Sitting in what looked like the back of a van. Nico stared at the image. Clara watched his face. Who is she? Clara signed. Nico did not answer. One of his men did. Isabella's daughter. Clara's heart stopped. Nico turned slowly. Repeat that, he said. The man swallowed. Her name is Sophia, hidden from public records. Raised mostly abroad. Marchetti kept her secret. Clara looked at the photograph again. A secret child. A child Massimo was willing to use. Isabella's cruelty suddenly gained another shadow. Not forgiveness. Never that. But fear had roots. And sometimes, women became monsters trying to survive men worse than themselves. Nico's phone buzzed again. Midnight. Abandoned church in South Boston. Come alone. or the child dies. Bring Clara, or everyone dies. Clara read the message over his shoulder. Nico turned the phone face down. No. Clara already knew what he meant. She signed. She is a child. It is a trap. Of course it is. You are not going. She looked at him. You do not get to choose that. His control snapped. Yes, I do. The room fell silent. Nico stepped close. Fury and fear burning through every line of him. I will not carry another girl's death because you think bravery means walking into a grave. Clara's eyes stung. She signed. And I will not let a child die because powerful men keep using women as shields. Nico stared at her. The anger slowly drained from his face, leaving something raw beneath. You will destroy me. He signed. Clara's hands lowered. Not because the words were cruel, because they were not. They were confession. Nico looked at her as if he hated the truth and could not stop giving it to her. If something happens to you, he signed, there will be nothing left of me worth fearing. Clara stepped closer. Then make sure nothing happens. His mouth tightened. There it was again. Trust. Terrible. Beautiful. Impossible. Nico closed his eyes for one brief second. When he opened them, the Mafia boss had returned. But now, Clara understood the difference. The monster was not replacing the man. It was protecting him. And maybe, now, protecting her too. The abandoned church stood near the edge of the industrial district, surrounded by rusted fences, dead weeds, and warehouses with broken windows. Midnight painted everything blue-black. Snow had stopped, but the ground still glowed faintly under the moon. Black SUVs waited blocks away with their lights off. Nico came through the front gates alone, exactly as ordered. Clara came another way, not because Nico allowed it, because she insisted. She wore a bulletproof vest beneath her coat, a small camera pinned inside her scarf, and a transmitter linked to Nico's men. Her hands were cold but steady. Inside the church, candles burned along the aisle, hundreds of them, too beautiful, too staged. At the altar stood Isabella Marchetti. Her white coat was gone. Her hair was loose. Her face looked stripped of its polished cruelty. Beside her, tied to a chair, was Sophia. The little girl's eyes were huge with terror. Massimo Marchetti stood behind them with a gun in his hand. Several armed men lined the shadows. Nico entered through the main doors. Every weapon turned toward him. He did not raise his hands. He did not hurry. He walked down the aisle like the church belonged to him. Massimo smiled. Your father would be proud. You always did know how to make an entrance. Nico's face was empty. Let the child go. Clara stood hidden near the side chapel. Watching through a crack in the old wooden screen, she could see Sophia's face. The child was crying silently, not deaf. Maybe. Just too frightened to make sound. Isabella looked at Nico, then at her daughter. Something in her face broke. Papa, Isabella whispered. Let Sophia leave. Massimo did not look at her. You failed me twice. First with the engagement, then with the waitress. Isabella flinched. Clara's heart pounded. Nico's eyes moved once, almost imperceptibly, toward the side chapel. He knew where Clara was. Of course he knew. Massimo lifted the gun and pressed it near Sophia's shoulder. Nico stopped walking. The entire church became breathless. Massimo said, You have a choice. The child or Clara Bennett. Bring the waitress out. Clara's blood chilled. Nico's mouth curved slightly. No. Massimo's smile faded. No, Nico's voice was calm enough to terrify. You want me desperate. I am not. Clara knew it was a lie. A perfect one. Massimo gestured, and one of his men dragged Isabella away from Sofia. The child sobbed. That was when Clara stepped out. Nico turned so sharply the candles near him flickered. His eyes locked on hers. Fury, fear, pleading, all in one look. Clara walked down the side aisle with her hands visible. Massimo smiled again. There she is, the little witness. Clara stopped near the front pew. She signed to Nico. Translate. His jaw clenched. Translate. She repeated. Nico's eyes burned. Then he turned toward Massimo. Clara signed. You are not powerful. You are just loud. Nico's voice carried the words through the church. Massimo's smile vanished. Clara continued. You used your daughter. You used your granddaughter. You used a dead girl named Lucia because you are afraid of men who protect what you can only own. Nico translated. Each word colder than the last. Massimo raised the gun toward Clara. Nico moved. So did Isabella. She threw herself into her father's arm. The shot went wild, striking the stained glass window above the altar. Colored glass rained down in red and blue shards. Chaos erupted. Nico's men crashed through side entrances. Gunfire lit the church in white flashes. Clara ran toward Sofia, staying low behind the pews as bullets struck old wood around her. She reached the child and fumbled with the rope. Sofia was sobbing, shaking. Clara touched her own chest, then pointed to Sofia. Safe. The little girl did not understand the sign, but she understood Clara's face. The rope loosened. A Marchetti man appeared behind them. Gun raised. Clara shielded Sofia with her body. The shot never came. Nico hit the man from the side and drove him into the stone floor with a violence that made even Clara freeze. He looked up at her, face splattered with rain from the broken roof. Eyes wild. Go, he mouthed. Clara pulled Sofia into her arms and ran toward the side door. Isabella crawled across the altar steps, bleeding from a cut on her forehead. Reaching for her daughter, Clara hesitated. Nico saw. His face said no. But Clara could not leave a mother reaching for her child. Even a Krell one. Even a broken one. She shoved Sofia gently toward Dr. Val, who had appeared at the side entrance with 2 guards. Then Clara turned back. Isabella looked up, stunned. Clara grabbed her hand. For 1 second, Isabella did not move. Then she held on. They ran together through smoke and candlelight. Behind them, Nico faced Massimo at the altar. No gun now, just 2 men and years of blood between them. Massimo held a knife. Nico was wounded at the ribs, his white shirt torn beneath his black coat. Still, he looked less like a man than judgment given form. Massimo spoke, and Clara read only part of it. Lucia begged. Nico's face changed. Massimo wanted rage. He got it. The fight ended against the altar beneath the broken stained glass. Nico disarmed him, struck him once, then forced him to his knees. A gun slid across the floor near Nico's hand. Every surviving man in the church froze. Massimo laughed through blood on his mouth. Do it. Be your father's son. Nico picked up the gun. Clara stood at the side aisle, breathing hard. Sofia crying behind her. Isabella gripping the doorway. Nico aimed at Massimo. The church held its breath. Clara stepped forward. Nico saw her. His finger tightened. Clara signed 1 word. Lucia. Nico's face broke. Not visibly to everyone. But Clara saw it. She saw the 17-year-old boy still trapped at the edge of his sister's death. She saw revenge waiting to become another cage. Slowly, Nico lowered the gun. He looked at Massimo with an expression colder than murder. "You do not get to die tonight," he said. "You get to answer." Police sirens flashed outside the church windows. Federal agents entered through the broken doors with weapons raised. Nico's lawyer behind them. Dr. Vela holding Sophia. And Clara's recording already transmitted. Massimo Marchetti was arrested on his knees beneath the altar. Isabella collapsed beside her daughter and held her like a woman who had finally reached the end of every lie she had been forced to live inside. Nico stood alone in the center aisle, covered in blood that was not all his, surrounded by candles, untouchable, and utterly lost. Clara walked toward him. He watched her come as if he did not deserve the sight. When she reached him, he signed with shaking hands. "Are you hurt?" Clara smiled through tears, still asking that. His eyes moved over her face. "Always." She touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath torn fabric. Then she signed, "I am safe." Nico's breath left him. Clara added, "With you?" For a moment, the church, the sirens, the war, the blood, the years of grief, all of it fell away. Nico lowered his forehead to hers. He did not kiss her. Not yet. He only stood there, shaking with the effort of not holding too tightly to the one living thing he had chosen over revenge. And Clara let him. 3 months later, Boston remembered the Marchetti scandal as a political earthquake. The news called it a criminal conspiracy involving dock contracts, bribed officials, attempted murder, witness intimidation, and a decades-old kidnapping case finally reopened. Clara called it the winter she stopped letting other people speak over her hands. She testified in federal court in a Navy suit and silver earrings her mother would have loved. She signed every answer clearly. The interpreter spoke beside her. Reporters watched. Lawyers tried to twist her. One even asked whether the stress of being deaf in a chaotic environment might have caused her to misinterpret Isabella's actions. Clara looked directly at the jury, then signed, "My deafness did not confuse me. Your assumption did." The clip went viral within an hour. This time, Clara did not feel exposed. She felt seen. Isabella testified too, not to save herself completely. She had done too much harm for that. But she told the truth about Massimo, about Sophia, about Lucia, about the night Nico's sister was taken and the men who had kept the evidence buried. Nico sat in the courtroom every day, not beside Clara. Behind her, close enough for her to feel his presence, far enough to remind the world she was not being controlled. When reporters shouted questions outside the courthouse, Nico never answered for her. When cameras pushed too close, his guards formed a wall. When one man yelled that Clara was Nico's weakness, Nico turned so slowly the crowd went silent. Clara touched his sleeve before he could respond. Then she signed, "Let them be wrong." Nico looked at her hands, then at her face. His expression said he wanted to ruin the man. His restraint said he loved her. That night, after Massimo Marchetti was denied bail, Clara returned to her apartment for the first time. Nico came with her. No guards inside. That was her rule. Her apartment looked smaller than she remembered. The couch was worn. The kitchen sink dripped. The bookshelf leaned slightly to the left. Her mother's favorite mug still sat near the window, exactly where Clara had left it weeks ago. Nico stood in the doorway like he was afraid to disturb something holy. Clara took off her coat and watched him. "You look uncomfortable." He glanced around. "I am used to rooms designed to impress enemies. This room does not impress you." His gaze returned to her. "It does." The answer warmed places in her she did not know were still cold. Clara walked to the window. Across the street, 2 black SUVs waited under the amber streetlight. She turned slowly. "Nico." He looked almost guilty. "Almost protection." He signed carefully. "Backup." She raised an eyebrow. He added, very distant backup. Clara tried not to smile. You are impossible. Yes. She laughed silently, and this time he watched the laugh like it was music. The moment changed. Softness entered the room without permission. Nico stepped closer. Clara did not step back. For months, their intimacy had lived in restraint, a hand at her back in a crowd, his coat over her shoulders outside court, her fingers brushing his wrist when nightmares pulled him too far into the past, his eyes finding her across dangerous rooms, his hands learning not only her language, but her moods, her boundaries, her silence. He had not kissed her, not once, because Nico Salvatore could take cities apart. But he would not take anything from Clara Bennett that she did not offer. Now he stood in her small apartment, surrounded by her real life, looking more dangerous than he ever had in a mansion full of armed men. Clara signed. Are you going to stand there all night? His eyes darkened. What do you want me to do? The question was not innocent. Clara felt heat rise through her. She stepped closer until only inches separated them. Ask me. Nico's control thinned. He lifted his hands. May I kiss you? Clara did not answer with signs. She rose on her toes and kissed him first. For 1 second. Nico did not move, as if the world had stopped. Then his hand came to her waist, careful and firm. And he kissed her back with all the restraint he had been bleeding for months. Not gentle exactly. Nico did not know how to love gently yet, but reverent, controlled, devastating. He kissed her like a man who had survived revenge and found something more frightening waiting on the other side. Hope. When they parted, Clara stayed close. His forehead rested against hers. She felt his breath against her mouth. He signed against her side with one hand, barely enough space between them. I am still dangerous. Clara touched his scarred jaw. I know. I have enemies. I know. I will want too much. Clara looked into his eyes, then learned how to ask. Something like a smile touched his mouth. For you, he signed. I will learn anything. Spring came slowly to Boston. Snow melted from the church steps where Massimo had fallen. The harbor thawed into blue. The restaurant where Clara had been humiliated reopened under new ownership after Nico bought it through a company with no public connection to him. Clara found out anyway. She stormed into his penthouse holding the contract papers. Nico looked up from his desk. I can explain. He mouthed. She signed. Did you buy my workplace? Technically, Nico. Yes. Why? His expression remained calm, which meant he knew he was in trouble. Because the owner allowed you to be humiliated in a room full of men who should have known better. So you bought the building? Yes. That is not normal. No. Clara stared at him. Then what exactly was your plan? He slid a folder across the desk. Clara opened it. Inside was a proposal. Not for her to waitress, for her to lead a hospitality accessibility training program across every Salvatore-owned property, legally structured under her own independent nonprofit, with full control, full salary, and no requirement that she accept. Clara read the papers twice. Her throat tightened. Nico watched her carefully. I did not want to give you a cage, he said slowly. I wanted to give you a door. Clara looked up. The man at the desk was still feared, still ruthless, still capable of terrifying calm. But he had learned something harder than violence. He had learned to offer instead of take. She signed. I will have my own lawyer review it. His mouth curved. I expected nothing less. And I choose the name. Of course. And you do not get to scare donors. His expression became thoughtful. Define scare. Clara pointed at him. Nico raised both hands in surrender. That made her laugh. He stood and came around the desk. stopping at the edge of her space, still asking, still waiting. Clara reached for his hand. He took it. Months later, the new program opened in the same dining room where Isabella had once snapped her fingers in Clara's face. The room looked different now, brighter, warmer. Long tables were set with white flowers. Staff moved with confidence. Interpreters stood near the stage. Deaf employees, hearing employees, reporters, advocates, and city officials filled the space. Nico stood at the back, half in shadow. Black suit, immaculate. Expression unreadable to everyone else. He looked like danger. To Clara, he looked like the man who had practiced the same apology to a dead sister until his hands shook. She stood at the front of the room. No tray, no uniform, no lowered eyes. Just Clara Bennett, speaking in the language that had always belonged to her. She signed her speech while an interpreter voiced it. She spoke about access, dignity, work, power, the cruelty of being underestimated, the violence hidden inside pity, the importance of making rooms where no one had to earn basic respect by surviving humiliation first. Then she paused. Her eyes found Nico. The room followed her gaze. He did not move. Clara signed. Some people learn your language because they want to control your silence. Nico's face remained still, but his eyes changed. Clara continued. And some people learn because they finally understand that love is not making someone smaller enough to protect. Love is standing beside them until the world learns how to see them clearly. The room applauded. Clara could not hear it, but she felt it through the floor. Afterward, Nico waited until the guests surrounded her, until reporters asked questions, until staff hugged her, until every person who had once looked through her now looked at her. Only then did he approach. Clara turned before he reached her. He signed. You were magnificent. She smiled. You look proud. I am. That's simple. No denial. No hiding. Clara stepped closer. Careful. Mr. Salvatore, people will think you have a heart. His eyes lowered to her mouth. Only one person is allowed to know that. She felt the warmth of the words all the way through her. Outside, sunlight poured through the tall windows, bright and clean over the tables, where cruelty had once sat dressed in diamonds. Nico looked toward the empty chair where Isabella had laughed, then back at Clara. Does it still hurt? He signed. Clara considered lying. Instead, she touched the table. Yes. Nico's jaw tightened. Clara took his hand before guilt could claim him. But not the same way. He nodded slowly. The room around them emptied as the last guest moved toward the reception hall. For one quiet moment, they stood alone in the place where everything had begun. Nico lifted his hands. The same sentence as that first night. You are safe with me. Clara's eyes stung. She stepped closer and signed back. I know. Then she added, but you are safe with me too. Nico went still. For a man who had survived bullets, betrayal, bloodlines, and ghosts, those words nearly destroyed him. He reached for her, slowly. She went willingly, and in the golden light of the dining room, where she had once been mocked for not hearing, Clara Bennett kissed the most feared man in Boston while the whole city outside kept moving. Unaware that a mafia boss had just surrendered to a woman who had never needed a voice to be powerful. Beyond the windows, black SUVs waited at the curb. Beyond the harbor, old enemies still whispered. Beyond the life they had built, danger still watched. But Clara no longer mistook danger for destiny, and Nico no longer mistook obsession for love. He had learned her language, not just the signs, the pauses, the boundaries, the fire in her eyes, the courage in her silence, The way she could stand in a room full of powerful men and make every one of them feel small without raising a sound. That night, after the last guest left, Nico took Clara to the roof of the restaurant. Boston glittered around them, alive with spring rain and gold light. He placed his coat around her shoulders, not because she was helpless, but because the wind was cold and he had learned the difference. Clara leaned against the railing. Nico stood beside her, not in front, not behind, beside. His hand found hers. She let him hold it. Below them, the city roared in a language she could not hear. Above them, the sky opened. And when Nico turned to her beneath the rain and signed that he loved her, his hands did not shake. Clara looked at the man who had once promised safety like a debt owed to the dead. Now he offered it like a future. She smiled, rain on her lashes, heart steady in her chest. Then she signed back the words that finally set them both free. I love you too. Nico closed his eyes as if the sentence had struck him harder than any bullet. When he opened them, he was smiling. Not much, just enough for Clara to know she had witnessed something rare. The monster had not disappeared. The world would still fear him. Enemies would still speak his name carefully. Men would still lower their eyes when he entered a room. But with Clara, Nico Salvatore had learned to become something even more dangerous than feared. He had become devoted, and somewhere far below. In the restaurant where cruelty had once laughed, a new generation of workers prepared the room for morning, a room where no one would ever again snap their fingers in a woman's face and expect her silence to protect them. Not while Clara Bennett owned her story. Not while Nico Salvatore stood beside her. Not while love, at last, had learned how to speak without sound.